I am Marlon Tobias. I am currently we are in my office studio at New College of Florida in Sarasota, Florida, where I serve as the drawing instructor. So this is my first year here. I just graduated with my MFA last year, so I'm still kind of settling into life after grad and being, an artist, an active artist, and also being an educator for the next generation, which is something I also kind of became passionate about in my time at grad school. We live on Old Dixie HWY Too is really a love letter to this small town called Callahan, Florida. It's about 15 minutes north of Jacksonville, Florida. And that is where my familial roots are. My maternal family is based there. Callahan is really, really small. The next towns over are 15 to 20 minutes away. So it's kind of in its own little bubble in some ways. It has one grocery store, Winn-Dixie, but it is but it is currently kind of developing a little bit more. There's a little over 1,000 residents in Callahan, probably related to half of them. And it's very rural, very, very rural, especially on the side of town my family is on. It's not legally segregated, but the remnants from segregation still lingers with the overall cultural structure of the town. So you have the black side of town, and then you have the white side of town, and there's really a distinct difference as far as the development. Growing up, I only really knew the black side of town, so I just thought Callahan growing up was just one big forest swamp. But then I looked, as I grew up, and discovered that there are, other bounds of Callahan that are much, much more developed, much more established. You can definitely, it shocked me, and you can definitely see the difference on how people kind of maneuver and navigate throughout that town. But overall, because my family has been there for generations, it's kind of like a second home. So I do have family roots that extend back to the early 1800s, but Cubby Wardlaw in particular, he came down in the mid 1800s. And I can establish that because my great-grandparents, my great-grandmother was his daughter, and she was born in the early 1900s or the late 1880s. My great-grandfather, her husband, was born, I know specifically 1888. Because that's literally 100 years before I was born. But he came in, there's a record of him in Callahan in the mid 1800s, acquiring land and really intimidating all of the lawmakers in that small town. I was actually born and raised in New York. I was born in Queens, New York, yeah, and I grew up in Newburgh, New York. So when I would come down to Callahan, Florida, I was known as the family, the group of family that came from up north to visit down south. We were the northern cousins, or we were the city cousins, and I grew up in the suburbs. So that's the irony of it. But that's what this work is an ode to. It's an ode to paying homage to those people who have not only shaped my life, but have played a pivotal role in this little town, in this little community. I think it's definitely very important that, especially as African Americans, we have this trauma in American history where we are constantly displaced, in which with getting displaced goes record that we were there. So it's really, we really have to do a lot more work to, you know, find, keep, preserve our record of existence and where we come from and how long we've been there and what we did and how, we lived our lives. Those are, every person's life is history. I definitely feel it's very important to, as African Americans, to do all we can to preserve our history and tell our story the way we authentically want our story to be told. So in the case of my family, they did a really good job also with keeping record of our history. So every family reunion, we would publish family reunion books with, kind of pictures and stories of, how certain people in the family branches are doing. But it also gave the history of our family and how we got into Callahan. On top of keeping a familial history, they also kept business history. So I have a very archival practice. So I'm constantly looking through old documents, collected items, old photos. And what I found were, letters, meeting minutes. My family had formal family meetings and took formal minutes and followed Robert's rules of order, and as a way to really govern ourselves and what we're and talking about future plans for the land and even how to divide the land amongst family members and what will that look like and how does that work. And those things were really pivotal in shaping a community within Callahan. Through, looking at these documents, they pretty much set up in their own kind of unofficial, town within a town. It's not on record, but seeing, these minutes and seeing these records of them really discussing how we're going to pay the taxes, what things do we need to put in place to make more money or feed our families. And it was a real collective effort. It wasn't a one-man island situation. And that is one of the reasons I think that my family was able to really sustain in this location without getting moved too much. So this series is based on that history of my family. And it's a collection of a few mediums. When I do work, I work with the goal of what will best tell this story, instead of really confining myself to a particular medium. So you have paintings, you have installation work, you have screen printing. I have some gouache paintings as well. I love especially with gouache in particular, it's a watercolor, but it's more opaque watercolor, kind of reminiscent of the opaqueness of the swamp. So I'm also sourcing a lot of collected items that my family has owned throughout history with Callahan. And I'm very particular about that too. I was reading Bell Hooks, and in one essay she talked about how space has an energy and an essence, and how space also kind of influences us as much as we influence space as well. So I think about that when I'm actually in Callahan. I'm looking at all of these family like heirlooms that have been passed down to generation, being touched by these people, and a part of their essence, kind of being a part of this object and feeling that love and feeling that welcoming, warm touch and familiarity as well. And knowing that this is not just an object, but this is an object that, someone in my same gene pool saw as valuable and saw as valuable enough to keep and either intentionally or unintentionally leave it to me to be responsible for. So this painting in particular, this is of an old wooden structure in the neighborhood around Callahan, in where my family sits and resides. The title of this is called "This Used to Be the Juke Joint," and the significance of this building in particular, I remember when we would come to Callahan, this would be like one of the first structures that we passed by, and it was always kind of in this somewhat dilapidated condition. And there were a few of those kind of in the area. And I asked my mother about it one time, and she said that, that actually used to be somewhat of, a juke joint or a club. A juke joint is, a little small town, the small type of club area, rural, that rural people would go to and, dance and party. What my great uncle did is he built this juke joint as a initial place to center the kids, give the kids a structure, a building to go to have fun, and to essentially keep safe when they weren't in the house. So it was really a meeting place of sorts for Callahan, and definitely a safe space for the children of that time. Looking at this and hearing, when I heard my mom talk about that, it made me look at this building with a whole new light. It's not just this, wooden structure that's falling apart, but it used to have a life in it, and it used to have a welcoming life in it, and it had a specific, significant function in that area. And even though it's in this condition that it is now, I still feel the essence and the purpose that it had, and that's why I think of it as significant enough to paint. With the help of the opaqueness with the gouache, it gives that swampy type of weight, but also the greenery as well. The two things about Florida, especially when you start to go in more of the rural areas of Florida, is not only the bright yellow sun, but the rich array of greens that just surround the terrain of rural Florida. And it's funny, like this particular part right here, as you can see, it's already kind of on its last leg. And it's interesting because recently, I would say within the last maybe 6 months or so, this actually fell down. So that also just goes to show the importance of capturing these things, even in the condition that they are now. It won't always be like that. And if it doesn't keep up, the conditions of it will just get worse. And then there goes the story of this structure, of this building. So that's another reason why it was so important for me to paint, because it literally could be gone the next day. So the triptych is entitled "The Let Out." It's set on the backdrop of the Greater Mount Pleasant Missionary Baptist Church, which is, if not the first, one of the first churches for Black folks in Callahan, Florida. And it also is a backdrop of my memories. So my family played a role in its founding. A lot of my family members' names are inscribed on the building. For every family reunion that we had growing up, on Sundays we would go to church, and this would be the church that we would go to. So there's a lot of family history associated with this church, along with the history that it has within the community. you're gonna see a lot of textures come out of this painting in particular. I painted the building with sand because the brick is very, very significant, especially to the history of Black churches. A lot of earlier Black churches were were more or less wooden shacks, and there was after enslavement and as African Americans started to build onto these churches, using brick was very significant because that's the almost literally the cementing or the more permanence of this structure. So I wanted to really give time to building, or not building, but when painting the structure, to also give that attention and that reverence to the labor that it took for these Black churches to be built with brick. And I wanted to set it specifically outside the church to highlight that time and those moments after the service. When you think of church, you think of the program and you think of the service that's going on inside the church. But what's very significant, especially for the history of Black folks, church was especially during slavery, church was one of those only places and times that you can actually commune with, your other enslaved Africans. And it was actually after the church, after the service, that also played a significant role, because when you're inside church, you're pretty much going by the program, and there's not a lot of room to really casually interact. But what I wanted to capture with this painting was those moments after church where the community was able to gather and casually talk and catch up and see what's going on, check up on people, and gossip and talk about those things that you couldn't really talk about in the house of the Lord. So, and where you really, truly, it served as grounds for cultivating and building onto that community. This is, in particular, what's going on outside the church played a significant role. And it's that in-between place, too. It's that in-between place between a formal setting and coming back into the secular world. And you're kind of literally in this space where you're experiencing that transition, and and you're seeing how people are taking what they've learned maybe in church and trying to figure out how this fits into this world and shaping their values and continuing to build on their communal structure. That's all what was encompassed in the let out. And that's why it's just as significant as any other point in the church experience. Overarching, there is Black history, but I had a constant question of, okay, well, how did I or the people that are closer to me play a part in this grand scheme of history here? So I dug deeper into my own family history, only to find that we have this very robust record of our presence here in this state, in the southernmost tip of the country, and that's what really kind of kept me intrigued and kept me interested and curious about who these people were and what parts did they play. And also, there were holes in the story. And as a creative, that just filled my imagination of the possibilities of how these people lived their lives. And I wanted to illustrate that. And I also wanted to give them their proper reverence as well. When I paint these photos, I also make sure to paint them in a way that's, in a sense, celebrating them, and giving them their proper due that maybe they didn't get in the full, recognition that they didn't get in their life. And me as their descendant, that's my gift to them. And that's my way of pouring into them and thanking them for what they have, what they've done for me, to what the things that they've done in their life to help contribute and make my life just a little bit more easier, or much more meaningful than, if that hadn't happened. So it's my curiosity with history, and my thirst to know where I come from, who are these people, and how can I thank them and show that they are, what they did in their life was not for naught. I'm excited to see how people will find themselves within the work. My work there's an intimacy that I like to pour into my work. There's a humanity that I want to keep, and I want to really bring to the forefront in my work. So when people come and engage with my work, it's a goal for me to, for them to kind of, in that process, kind of break down those barriers, those stereotypical barriers, if there are any, and really find relation to these people and to this community. And I'm always interested when someone sees my work and they're reminded of something from their life, or someone from their life, or their childhood, or it sparks a memory. And it's at that point, getting a person to that point is where I truly believe you can make a significant impact in someone's empathy. So I'm really excited to see how viewers engage with this work, especially people from a similar type of setting from Florida, or of Florida, to really kind of relate to it.